this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. Before we get started with our interview today with Justin, I just wanted to mention very quickly that my name is Don Davis and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And with that, let me introduce our guest for today. In this episode of Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Justin Goodarz. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Verified Clinical Trials with extensive experience in strategic partnerships and eClinical technology across leading industry companies. So with that, welcome, Justin.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for having me.
Excited it's great to have you here. Would you mind just telling listeners a little bit about what it is that brought you into life sciences? And then more specifically, what is it that that brought you into clinical trials?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the life sciences space now for about 15 years, mainly working within site and patient-facing technology to support efficiencies within clinical trials. Full transparency, it wasn't an industry that I was looking to get into. It really happened by chance. And I'll kind of tell somewhat of a funny story. My first job out of school, I was looking to apply to Cintas, which is the chemical and uniform delivery service company, pretty large company. I was on my second round interview and things were going well. I was pretty confident I was going to get the job. And a very small startup company at that time called Greenfire reached out, saw my resume on Career Builder back in the day. I wasn't going to go on the interview. I had actually told him I was getting ready to accept a position with Cintas. My dad kind of forced me, said, just go get some interview experience. You're still pretty young and new out of school. Ultimately ended up going on the interview with Greenfire, got offered the position, kindly declined the position, got hired by Cintas a couple of days later. But as an outside sales rep for Cintas, you need to be on their car insurance. Unfortunately, while I was in high school, I got caught speeding a couple of times and I had a couple of points on my license, and so they couldn't insure me. And so 2 days later, I called back Greenfire and said, hey, I think it'd be really cool to work for a startup company in the life sciences space, and worked there for about 6 years. And so that's how I got into the life sciences space, by chance, really.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of interesting, how serendipitous some things can be, right? And sort of lead you to different points in your career. So how did your experience with Greenfire, WCG, Trifecta, and SiteRx prepare you for what you're currently doing with verified clinical trials?
Yeah, so the cool thing about my career is I've been working within startup companies my entire career. Greenfire I was number 19 hired. It was less than $1 million a year revenue company when I was brought on. And the nice thing about working at these startup companies that are doing disruptive stuff is you essentially get to write your own path in terms of your career trajectory within the organization. And so when I first started at Greenfire, I was selling one of their technologies, which was called the Clin Card, which is used to streamline stipends and reimbursements to research participants to individual research sites. Was successful at that for the first year or two, realized we were missing a really big target market, and then went, which was universities and academic medical centers, and was given the opportunity to explore that area. So after doing some due diligence, I ended up writing the business plan, the pricing structure, and started selling it to universities and hospital systems enterprise-wide. And that really became the standardized process throughout the clinical research space to in support of these large universities and hospital systems. Then transitioned to the sponsor side, and moved out to San Francisco to oversee the West Coast, selling the technology directly to sponsors and CROs. And so it was really cool to see a small organization grow to about 250 people by the time that I left, and essentially write my own path within the organization. Same thing with Trifecta Clinical. I followed the guy that was somewhat of my mentor at Greenfire, Rick Ward, over to Trifecta Clinical. And I was one of 3 business development folks over there. And we were successful at selling a site communication platform used to deliver training to investigators at research sites, streamlined that process, reduced redundant training. They eventually got acquired, and then moved over to SiteRx. SiteRx was a really, really niche product in patient recruitment, and it was physician-driven patient recruitment. And again, had the opportunity to kind of explore the sponsors that we wanted to sell into, even though they were really laser focused on neurodegenerative disease. It was new. And so you get to figure out who the decision makers are. It's trial by error, essentially. And so all of that experience working with these startup disruptive companies have brought me to verified clinical trials. And what we're doing over here is extremely unique. It's not like we're digitizing a paper process or anything along those lines. We've created a process to make sure that, well, actually what we're doing is we're confirming a research participant's eligibility based upon their research history, which has been a gap in the clinical research industry. And so with all that being said, working at startup companies has been my entire career, and it's set me up for verified clinical trials as their chief commercial officer.
Very good. And I guess give me a little bit of insights in terms of some of the key challenges that you faced in the position of chief commercial officer at Verified Clinical Trial.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the biggest challenge is lack of awareness in terms of what we do, because we are creating a process. Really what we do is we're preventing professional and duplicate research participants from entering clinical trials. And I think it's somewhat unimaginable for pharmaceutical companies and sponsors to think that a research participant would enroll into a clinical trial multiple times. There is still a very wide disconnect between what happens at the sponsor level and what happens at the site level. And thinking that somebody's going to take this investigational product multiple times, either for financial gain or out of desperation because they're concerned about being in the placebo cohort, or lack of drug supply. It's something that you can't really imagine happening, but it is. And so I think the toughest part is education. The second most difficult part is that our technology gets stronger with more sponsors and research sites using our technology, because we have the ability to prevent cross-sponsor, cross-phase, cross-therapeutic area dual enrollment. And we've definitely hit that critical mass now over the past 10 years that we've been in business. But it was a tough and bumpy road to kind of convince all of these sponsors to run every one of their participants through our technology to make sure whether or not they're eligible. So I would say those are the 2 most difficult and rewarding, difficult challenges, but rewarding, because we're seeing everything come to fruition now. So
if you were a participant in the clinical trial, I mean, I have not been, right? I've certainly seen this from the outside, but just curious to walk the path just a little bit with you to try and understand this a little bit better. So if you were a participant in the clinical trial, let's say you enrolled, in some cancer, clinical trial, and you don't know yet whether or not if you are accepted into that clinical trial, but you enroll in multiple clinical trials. Now all of a sudden you get accepted to one, and the second one comes along. I'm assuming that there's some way to opt out of that, second clinical trial. Is that right?
yeah, so I mean, it really depends. What we've been able to identify, having supported tens of thousands of clinical trials now, is there's three participant personas within the research space. There is the deceptive research participant. So those are those participants that are going from site to site, study to study for that financial gain. And this is definitely more prevalent within certain therapeutic areas, such as vaccine, where they're looking for healthy volunteers, um, or or areas like obesity or hypercholesteremia, where the inclusion exclusion criteria is so similar to so many other studies that are taking place, where you could just get into the clinical trial, you get these stipends, which are pretty significant, and you don't take the drug. Um, and then you've got your desperate research participants. So oncology, Alzheimer's disease, where you may have been diagnosed with a death sentence essentially. And so you're concerned about being in that placebo cohort. And if you're just as an example, if you're in a mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease study and you don't feel any change in your behavior or something along those lines, there's other options that are out there. There's a lot of sponsors that are targeting the same research participant, and you could just jump to another clinical trial, and you're not going to let the first clinical trial know that you're going to another clinical trial, because that's exclusionary criteria. You sign an informed consent form that says that you will not enroll into multiple clinical trials at once. But if you're desperate, you're going to do what you got to do. So,
Got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a bunch.
I mean,
but yeah, those are two that we see quite often.
yeah, not a world that most of us, have to be in, unless you're in this space like you, or
Right.
as a participant. So that helps. So can you explain a little bit more about the mission and the main objectives of verified clinical trials and how your role contributes?
Yeah, absolutely. Our main priority is to enhance patient safety, data quality, and study integrity. In every single clinical trial, it specifically says that a participant cannot be dual enrolled in multiple clinical trials at once. They can't be violating a previous study's washout period. Many times in the exclusion criteria of a protocol, it says a participant cannot have had prior investigational product exposure or needs to be naive to the compound. And without having a solution in place during the screening process to confirm whether or not that participant is in another clinical trial or violating a previous study's washout period, there's no defense against it. A research site has no way to confirm whether or not that participant is in another clinical trial. When you think about what happens at a research site, if you need to know how much a participant weighs, use a scale. If you need to know their temperature, you use a thermometer. If you need to know their health history, you use electronic medical records. But when they need to know whether or not the participant is involved in another clinical trial, literally all that the site does is ask that research participant. And if they say no, they take their word as face value. And so it's an outdated model, which is proven to be unsuccessful. Studies have failed specifically due to this reason. And so our goal is to implement an additional step in the screening process to confirm whether or not they're eligible. And again, the mission is to enhance patient safety, data quality, and study integrity.
So I have to assume that you have some way of verifying who somebody is and more or less, figure out whether or not they've enrolled in other things. But is it as simple as just knowing who somebody specifically is, or is it something more complex than that?
On the surface level, it seems like it might be somewhat simple to just know whether or not that participant is involved in multiple studies, but due to privacy laws and regulations, and which are even more strict in Europe with GDPR, it's actually quite difficult. So it's not just a participant going into a registry. There's a lot of rules and regulations surrounding what can be entered. The participant has to consent to going into the registry, but they're also associated with a specific protocol. So we know whether or not that participant has been involved in the phase 2. And now if they're screening for the phase 3 and part of that exclusion criteria says they can't have had prior IP exposure, they wouldn't actually be eligible for that study. So it is quite complex behind the scenes, but very easy for a research site to enter that participant into our database. And then all the heavy lifting is done on the back end.
Very good. So what are some of the more significant partnerships or collaborations that you have at Verified Clinical Trials, and how have they benefited the company?
So we are therapeutic area agnostic. Our main client or customer is the pharmaceutical sponsor that's running and essentially paying for the clinical trial. So we're working with, I'd say, 50% of the top 20 currently right now, where they've realized that this is a gap historically in their screening process, and now they're implementing us across our portfolio of studies. I'd say another really strong strategic partner of ours is with Velocity Clinical Research. Velocity Clinical Research is the largest wholly owned research site network in the world, with over 100 research sites globally. And they've implemented our technology across all of their sites, across every single one of their studies, to prevent this issue of professional and dual enrollment. And then there's also some other technology partners that we're speaking to about integrating and just reducing the number of technology that the sites need to use, because there is that site technology fatigue that goes on. So Creo, for example, is a company that we're looking to collaborate with, who is a disruptive technology. They're an eSource vendor. There are CTMS technologies out there that we're looking to integrate with. But I'd say our main strategic partners and clients are the pharmaceutical company, because ultimately they're the ones that determine whether or not our technology is used.
Very good. What about the ways that you might see innovation at Verified Clinical Trials? How do you see that, and what sort of projects are you most excited about?
So we're working on many different things right now. First, I think that what we need to do is we need to become a standardized solution across the entire industry. So we still have a lot of work to do before we are going to continue to innovate new verticals and products. That being said, we are doing some stuff on the side as well. One of the really cool pieces of technology that we've created to add another level of security is biometric capabilities. So it's a proprietary picture of the right index finger to, again, just make sure that it is the person that they are saying they are. We're also rolling out facial recognition. There's some other cool technology that we're looking to build right now. Can't really provide too much insight into that, but then I think that there's a real unique opportunity to use some AI to drill into the reporting that we provide, because we provide reporting that no other company can generate based on our capabilities and the number of participants in our registry. So I think that we're going to start to see some really unique data filtered with AI. So that's what we're working on right now. But again, there's still a lot of work to do with just implementing this technology across the industry to prevent duplicate participants from entering these studies.
That's great. And in terms of metrics that you use or key indicators that you use to measure success, what are some of the things that you use today with some of the strategic partnerships that you have?
So at the end of the day, I'm a sales guy. I'm heading up commercial. So the main driver right now for me, where I sit, is revenue, and new logos. So bringing on new sponsor clients and sites, and also expanding throughout other therapeutic areas underneath the same sponsor umbrella. You know, what's interesting is that this is a gap regardless of phase or therapeutic area in the screening process. We see it as an issue across every phase and therapeutic area, this issue of professional and duplicate participants. But some sponsors, again, can't believe that it happens within certain therapeutic areas, and so they'll only implement us into their vaccine portfolio of studies, but they won't implement us into their dermatology portfolio of studies. And so that takes work, trying to get a 40,000 person company to implement a technology enterprise wide. So those would be the three things that I think really I look at in terms of metrics: is revenue, new logos, and expanding our services across an existing client.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So, Justin, what's the greatest piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
So I mentioned a gentleman, Rick Ward, earlier, who kind of took me underneath his wing when I was at Greenfire and helped just, one, provide insight into the industry, best practices, two, to how to sell essentially, and not inflate certain things that I'm saying or certain metrics. But the main thing that he said to me that really resonated is control what you can control. I mean, in sales, you're trying to go a million miles an hour. The goal is to sell as quickly and as much as possible. And sometimes you can get sloppy when that happens. I mean, even small things where you set up a meeting on Google Meets and you forget to add the link to use the webcam. And then you've got to go back the minute before the meeting starts and send out a new invite to make sure people can see you while you're talking. Just small things like that where it can completely throw off a meeting and you will go into that meeting and you're all disheveled. And so just really controlling the things you can control, because this is such a complex, industry that we work in. Science is hard. People are trying to do some really great things. And if I can make sure that they're logging on to a webcam without having any difficulties, that's something that I need to do. And so, yeah, it's control the things you can control.
Absolutely. So what inspires you?
I mean, I love working at these startup companies, seeing an idea come to fruition through hard work and motivation and tenacity. I think that one of the things that really inspires me is also seeing my peers succeed. I mean, there's guys that I've seen come into this industry who started with me at Greenfire, and they've gone off and worked with other startup companies, and now they're killing it in their respective roles. And even outside of the industry that I work in, I dipped my toes into the music industry when I was living out in Los Angeles, and I've seen friends struggle to become these who are now world-renowned artists. And so seeing other people succeed is really inspiring to me, because I help them out, they help me out. All boats float with a rising tide. So, yeah.
Absolutely. What concerns you?
What concerns me just in general, or about the business that I'm in? Because there's a lot of things that concern me.
I normally leave this up to the guest, right? So, this could be anything like the current environment, could be the research environment, or it could be something in your personal life. It's up to you.
Sure. What concerns me? What's concerning me right now is I think I've kind of missed the gap to get my puppy neutered. I've been told that you have to do that within a specific amount of time. So that's kind of giving me a little bit of anxiety. I mean, what's going on in the Middle East is always concerning. The trends that we're seeing in the obesity space right now with professional and duplicate research participants is very concerning. I mean, I just read a stat from IQVIA that said there's over 178 different compounds that are trying to get into the GLP-1 race. And all of these sponsors and pharmaceutical companies are going for the same research participants. And so it'll be next to impossible to find somebody who hasn't already been exposed to the compound or isn't in their washout period. So that's concerning. So yeah, there's a lot of things that concern me, but you got to compartmentalize them.
Did you say washout period or watch out?
Washout period. So yeah, so when you're in a clinical trial, many times there's a washout period. So after you've completed the study, there might be a 60 or 120-day washout period where you can't be involved in another clinical trial because you still have that investigational product in your body. And so if somebody completes a study on Monday and then enrolls into another study on Tuesday because they want that GLP-1 drug, because there's there might be lack of drug supply that we're seeing with some of these candidates. That's an issue. That's a washout period violation. And so that concerns me.
Very good. And the last question, what excites you?
The trajectory that Trifecta Clinical is on right now, I think we've created a really, really good product. I think it's starting to resonate with the industry, and people are starting to understand that there is an issue. So it's exciting to see the growth that we've had over the past couple of years. Another thing that excites me is my girlfriend's getting some really cool new job opportunities where she's essentially, her dreams are coming true in terms of being a radio host for the music industry. That's really cool. Getting ready to do some travel in Europe. That's exciting over the summer. So those are the things that excite me right now. But and some really cool things are happening with the family. Where my brother's seeing is in his professional career, they're both seeing some really cool advancements within their organizations. So that's exciting as well. But yeah, a lot of things excite me as well.
Really good to hear. Yeah, I mean, certainly Europe's a fun place to travel. It's great to hear as well about the job opportunities, that are being afforded as well. I mean, I think there's been a lot of overall struggles that people have had, in the past with recent past with, job opportunities and things like that here in the United States. So it's good to hear that, things are moving forward. But yeah, very exciting times for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So what about you? What excites you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's the environment that we're in, right? I mean, I feel like the technology side of things excites me the most. That's probably the number one, thing, especially whenever it comes to, things that enable us to be not just, there's a lot that AI can do. And a lot that people, sort of say, hey, look, I don't want, something to sound too much like AI, or I don't want, something to take away my voice. At the same time, there's a lot that AI can do that, at least puts things further down the road than where they were, right? So those are the things that excite me the most, to where I feel like I spend the most amount of my time as well anymore, as also. So yeah.
AI definitely excites me as well. It also concerns me in some capacity, but I think that if it's done the right way and rolled out the right way and trained the right way on sound data, that it can do a lot of good things. Because the way that some of the AI is being implemented into the clinical research industry is not on sound data, and so that's concerning as well. But overall, I think that it'll expedite drug discovery and hopefully get drugs to market faster.
Yeah. Well, Justin, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. I really appreciated your insights in terms of the things that you're working on. This is definitely an area I haven't spent a lot of time taking a look at. And so it was great to hear your insights and all the things that you guys are working on at Verified Clinical Trials. And thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Don.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.